Okay, so welcome back. Now, as I mentioned in the previous video, the first thing we're going to look at is grammar, and we're going to cover the basic points in this video here right now. So, if we break down language into its constituent parts, the lowest level building block is the individual word. I mean, we can go a little bit smaller than that, we can go down to letters and syllables, but the lowest building block of meaning is the individual word. So that's where we're going to start from. And as I'm sure you've done in school in the past, there are several main types of words, and I've got on the screen here the 4 main types of words. There are 1 or 2 others, but these are the 4 main types, absolutely fundamental to your understanding of grammar. And so we're going to go through them one by one. Before we do so, just take a moment now, pause the video, and see if you can write a definition for these 4 word types here. Just rack your brains, think back, try and remember, and try and write a definition for each of these 4 word types. Okay, so hopefully you've had a little go at doing that exercise. Now we're going to look through them one by one. So first up on the left hand side here is the noun, and this is commonly described as a naming word. Okay, so we're mainly talking about objects and things. So for example, the computer, the pen, desk, glass, anything you can point to and name. This is extremely common word form. And without nouns, we can't really have any type of a language because we can't even define the thing that we're talking about. So nouns are super important, not just in English, in every language. Now, as well as those nouns, which we would probably describe as concrete nouns because they're something concrete you can point to, something physical, we also have abstract nouns. And abstract nouns are more like concepts. So there's something that you can identify and you can name, so you can still give them a name, but they're not something you could actually point to. So for example, love or peace or justice. Those would be 3 abstract nouns. We know what those concepts mean. They're important concepts, but you can't really point at something and say that is justice or that is love because they're abstractions. The best you could really do is say that is an example of peace or an example of justice. So I'll just put a couple of examples here: justice, peace, etc. So that's one type of noun, an abstract noun. Most nouns though would just be concrete nouns. Okay, so moving on, below the noun here and linked to the noun is the adjective. The adjective is a describing word and it describes a noun. So anything that describes a noun. So for example, the tall tree, the blue car. The adjectives in those sentences would be tall and blue because they're describing something. In one case the tree, and then in the other case the car. So they're describing a noun. An adjective describes a noun. Okay, so next up on the right hand side here we have the verb. Okay, so the verb is another absolutely fundamental word form in our language. And the verb is commonly described as a doing word, a word of action. So things like to run, to study, play, to drink, to eat. All of these things are verbs because it's describing an action. And a good test for whether a word is a verb or not is, could you put the word to before it? And would that make any sense? So for example, with a noun like computer, you couldn't really say to computer. It wouldn't really work. But with a verb like type or typing, you could say to type. So that's quite a good test of where your verb is in the sentence if you're trying to identify the verb. Now, as well as these verbs of activity, doing words, we also have verbs of state. There are fewer verbs of state, but some of them are quite common. So, for example, if I say Max is tall, is Max really doing anything in that sentence? He's not doing anything. He just is tall. And the verb in that sentence is the verb to be. He is tall. And we call that a verb of state because there's no activity going on, but there is still a verb in that sentence. So the verb to be is probably the most common verb in the English language, the most common verb in most languages. And it's actually a verb of state, it's not a doing word. We've also got one or two others as well. To feel is another good one. If you say, I feel tired this morning, are you really doing anything? Not as such. It is a verb of state. So it's also important to be able to identify verbs of state as well. And lastly here, linked to the verb, is the adverb. And an adverb is a word that describes a verb. So for example, she ran quickly. To run is the verb, quickly is the adverb. He studied intensely. To study is the verb, and intensely is the adverb. And you'll notice many adverbs end in ly. That's very common to see with adverbs. So these are your four main word types: nouns, adjectives, verbs, and adverbs. And you should be able to identify all of these fairly straightforwardly. It's also worth pointing out as well that this does count as technical language. So on the analytical work that you do on the language paper, you're going to want to actually identify certain word types in your commentary. So for example, you might say, in the first paragraph, we have a lot of visual description. We see 5 or 6 adjectives related to sight and colour. And then you would quote those, you would list those. But you would get credit for using the word adjective there because it would be technical vocab. Okay, so now we're just going to have a quick go at identifying nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. So I just want you to pause the video now and take a look at the sentences on the screen. And what I want you to do is just to underline the nouns and then just put a little N underneath. Verbs, do the same and put a little V underneath. And then adjectives, AD, and then adverbs, AV. So just have a go at that now. Just take a couple of minutes to run through that exercise. Okay, so let's just review that exercise then. So this first sentence here, Andrew ran around the old building several times. Okay, so first off here, I can see we've got this verb to run. It's obviously the past tense here, so I'll underline that and put a V under there. And if I continue through the sentence, I can see here, building, something I can point to and name. That's a noun right there. And I also have, right next to the noun, I have something describing it. It's an old building. So this is going to be an adjective. Okay. Okay, so moving on to the next sentence. We played cricket in the park this afternoon. Okay, so first up, we've got the verb here, to play. Again, we've got the past tense. Now we have two nouns here. We've got cricket and the park as well. So we've got a noun there and a noun there. And we could also say that this afternoon is also a noun. Okay, so we've got another noun there. Okay, so moving on to the next sentence. Isabel felt tired after working hard in the cafe. Okay, so this is a verb of state that we mentioned before, to feel. So we've got a verb there. We've then got another verb here, working. Okay, and then we've also got our to, and then we also have our adverb here, working hard. Adverb there. And then lastly, we also have a noun at the end of the sentence there, cafe. Now this word here, tired, Isabel felt tired. You could describe that as an adverb, or you could also potentially describe it as an adjective as well. I'd actually have to go away and look that up and see which one of those categories that word there would fall under. Because Isabel was tired, so the tiredness refers to Isabel. Isabel is a noun, but she also felt tired, and to feel is obviously a verb as well. So I just have to leave a bit of a question mark by that one. Okay, next up, he shouted loudly from inside the empty cave. So we've got the verb to shout here, again, past tense. Loudly is definitely an adverb there. Sorry, an AV. So that should be an AV. Okay, so loudly is definitely an adverb there, ends in ly. From inside the empty cave. So we've got cave, which is the noun, and empty, which is the adjective. Okay, so this is just a little bit of an exercise here in identifying these different word forms. It's important you're able to do that fairly easily. Okay, so hopefully that was a useful exercise. In the next video, we're going to move up from the level of the individual word, and we're going to look at sentence construction in itself. So I will see you in there.